Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about a pose that's offered in a lot of your classes today that kind of is a challenging posture for most of us out there if we don't do it regularly in our practice. It's a really good back bend, but it can be injurious if we don't do it correctly and we don't feel the kind of things we should be feeling in this pose. Now, everybody has different places of mobility in their back. Some of us have more mobility in our lower back. Some of us have greater mobility in our upper back. This posture really requires a lot of lower back mobility, a lot of excessive lordosis. And that's not a bad thing if you have that. If you have a lot of ability to extend your back, that just means the way you're built is user-friendly for this type of range of motion. For people that don't have a lot of lower back extension, this posture is very challenging. So we're going to show you lots of ways to get into this pose. Well, the most important things we need to have flexible for this pose to work for our bodies. And I'll show you some modifications too. So it's called Ustrasana. It's the camel pose. And it's the one that when the teacher calls out for it, you're like, ugh, usually, because you know how uncomfortable it is, okay? So what do we need for Ustrasana? Well, one thing we need flexible hip flexors. And a lot of us don't have that when we walked into yoga class because we have a lot of this motion going on all day long where we're sitting and our hip flexors shorten. So when we get into a yoga class, ideally our teacher or our class is going to warm up these muscles so that you can create what's called hip extension, moving the thigh bone back behind you. We need lots of flexibility for these muscles to be active for this pose to be able to go into the deep variation of this pose because we need to let our hips slide forward, and that's where hip extension creates an ability to do this pose. We also need some flexibility on our abdominal wall. Too much tightness here, it's not going to let our back bend like this, extending wise, and we need a lot of lumbar curve to do this pose comfortably as well. We also need mechanically a lot of space between the vertebrae on the back of on the lower back area. Some of us are born with a lot of space between each one of those vertebrae, and we have to lean back to create compression. Some of us are born with kind of not much gap between the vertebrae and our lower back, so when we lean back, we get right into compression right away. I just want to tell you, whether you're the first example or the second example, it doesn't matter. The pose is still good for you. You can just stop at certain levels and notice that if you're in compression, which means I'm feeling impingement here, that's kind of what you're trying to do in the pose. And to push yourself past that compression is where we get into trouble. That's where we get into injuries in yoga class. So compression is good. We want to compress bones in our practice, but we don't want to ever push aggressively past compression. That's when you're going to have injuries happen in your body. So keep that in mind. So let's try Ustrasana. We're going to come up on our hands and knees, placing the knees and the feet about hip width apart. Let's stand up on the knees. So right away, we're already in a position where we're stretching the hip flexors. The hands are going to set behind our hips. So let's just try the first variation. I'm going to have Freda really strongly tuck her tailbone. It's called nutation. We're going to push our tailbone under towards the pubic bone. See how our lower back, go ahead and relax that for a second. See how our lower back is going to lighten up in the curve. She's got curve right now. Now she tucks her tailbone. See how that curve disappears a little bit? That's what we want to do. A lot of our back bends, we coach that way in our practices so that you can lean back and find the curve by leaning back. So I'm just going to have her lean back slightly. A little bit, there we go, right about there. Notice how she's protecting her neck, and she's in a pretty strong compression. So if you're in a class and you're one of those people that you're not so sure about the whole pose, maybe you're feeling compression right away, then we're going to just stay here in the posture, and this is where you're going to stay in the stretch, okay? Now she's going back deeper, but I want her to come out of it for a second. So she's going to relax her hands on the floor. Now, the second variation we can try is with the toes tucked under. So she's going to tuck her toes. Now, ideally, your feet are comfortable with this. If your feet don't like this, then this is going to be an issue for you. So this variation doesn't work for everybody. We're going to come back up. So we're going to put our hands back behind our pelvis. They're not on our lower back. They're behind the pelvis, on the pelvis bone. We're going to tuck our tailbone again. The hips slide it forward. We're going to squeeze our shoulder blades, and we're going to lean back. Same exact thing, but this time we might take our hands and place them back on the heel bones. You see, Freda's got a pretty deep back bend, so it's easy for her to place her hands. For some of us, that's really a struggle to get those hands back like that. We can come back up for a second. We can try modifications in classes. So we can try just one hand. So maybe we just try, tuck our tailbone. We try just right hand. And we keep our left hand free and relaxed on our hip like that. And then we come right out of it. And during that same little sequence in class, we do the left hand. And we just pause for a few moments, getting a taste of the pose, but not trying the full pose. Okay, let's come back up. Come back on your hands, relax your lower back. So she's doing a lot of back bends here, so I'm going to rub her out a little bit. Now the third one is, of course, the most challenging variation, which is the toes are pointed. You can see the heels drop a lot. We want our hips to slide a little forward in this pose. So again, we need flexibility here. We need flexibility here. We also need good, strong muscles that are creating stability on the front of our body. Tailbone tucks. And we want to work our arms and shoulders. So when you get back in the full pose, I really want you to squeeze the scapula super tight together. So let's tuck our tailbone. Let's lean back. Maybe we hold here. Maybe we just try one hand like we just did. Maybe we try both hands. One at a time, of course. And now we're going to squeeze the scapula. Hips slide forward, but they don't go past your knees. Keep your hips over the knee joints. Notice how our hips are right over the knee. We're not letting them go past. We're extending. She's really stretching her neck. If she wanted to protect her neck a little bit, she'd draw the chin back towards the chest. That's okay to do it that way. Some people like dropping the head back and feeling a full stretch in the neck. Any one of those is fine. Beautiful compression. She's not going past her compression. She's safe. And then it's about 5-8 breaths is good enough. She comes right back up, supporting her back with her hands, land on the hands, and we're going to do a big, big cat stretch. Kind of release that area. Go ahead and sit back and relax. Thank you. What's that posture good for? Great for the digestive area, intestines, colon, stomach. Wonderful for stimulating energy in the body. It's great for the lower back. Provided we're doing a balanced practice. We don't want to do this one alone. This is in combination with other poses like forward bends, side bends that are pushing our back into different range of motion that it's not used to. Building strength, building range of motion that's healthy for those little discs between each vertebrae. A lot of times we sit a lot, the front of our spine, this area, the anterior part of our spine gets compressed and those discs start to lose their gaps. They start to create less and less gap. So this posture is great for opening the front of the spine, creating more of a gap, letting those discs re-expand. It does create a lot of compression on the back of the spine, obviously, compresses those discs. So again, we want to combine this with a forward bend. So what Freda's doing right now is a perfect way to follow up an Ustrasana, which is a pose we call Balasana, or the child's pose. So she's now releasing all that compression, letting blood flow into that area. We just created blood flow to the front of your spine. Now we're creating blood flow to the back of the spine. Great pose for your lower back in combination with other poses. Builds strength, builds range of motion, builds healthy cartilage between your vertebrae. Thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy Ustrasana in your practice. Namaste, yogis.